Welcome back to FM Garage. My name is Mike, and in this episode, we're going to talk about some new, shiny engine bay blink. What do we have here in front of us? I have a overflow tank, and then I also have a washer bottle. As you can see, they're both pretty similar as far as how they look. They're both aluminum construction. They are fully welded tanks, and they both have our logos on them. So these are brand new tanks to the market as far as these are FM exclusives, only from Flyin Miata. The Coolant Overflow tank, let's go ahead and start there. This is relatively standard as far as how it fits in the car, its relative size. There's not a whole bunch that you can do without getting pretty crazy as far as changing the functionality of a coolant overflow tank in a Miata is concerned. But let's cover some of the individual things that may be a little bit different than what you might see elsewhere in the market. So what I have in my hands right now is an NB coolant overflow tank. So this is specific to 1999 to 2005 Miatas. And fortunately for these cars, it is relatively simple. They basically sit on the fender well. There's a couple of attachment points. That's it. The cool thing that we have, though, that many other tanks don't have, is a sight glass. And not just a round sight glass, but actually a sight tube. And the reason why this is beneficial over a sight glass is because this actually shows you more than just about a 1/4 inch worth of level. This you can actually get about 1.5 inches, 1 3/8, something like that, where you can see very clearly if you've got coolant in there and about how much. It's also, this is towards the front of the vehicle, so if you pop your hood, it's right up front, easy to see, easy to access. Compared to other tanks on the market, it does have a knurled sealed cap, and it does not have a breather in it. The breather on these tanks is actually over here on the side. So why did we do this? One, it's a little bit easier for the cap construction. We didn't have to have like a filter or anything special that we added to the cap. But also two, if you've ever had a cap that has a vented hole in it and your radiator cap fails, you suddenly have a pressurized tank that becomes a geyser, and it sprays everywhere on the bottom of your hood, all over the top of your engine. It's a mess. So being able to have a vent here on the side helps to eliminate that being an issue where you're getting it everywhere. If you do have a radiator cap that fails and your tank suddenly sees a lot of pressure, it needs somewhere to go. So you still have to have a vent, but this points it towards the fender. It'll squirt into the fender and be deflected off into like the fender well, into the guard, and it'll drip out onto the ground rather than all over your engine bay. It does include some little hardware pieces. So on this side, we've got a couple of hose barbs. We've got an extra sight glass tube, so in case you accidentally bung yours up that's on the tube or on the tank already, you've got an extra couple there. It also has a little foam pad that's needed for the NB2s because there is a taller flange on the fender well that you want to protect the bottom side of the tank whenever you install it on NB2s. And then also we have a 90-degree swivel fitting. So this little swivel fitting fits into the bottom of the tank. This is where the tank is fed from the radiator. So this 90-degree plugs in here with one of these little hose barbs, and that way you have a little bit of a swivel. It'll direct your hose. I'll show you more on the car in just a little bit, but that just makes it easier for fitment. You aren't restricted to just one angle that your hose comes off at, an imprecise angle. Will there be an NA version? And there will be. Unfortunately, we don't have them available just yet. We are working on them, and we hope to have them here in the near future. So keep your eyes peeled. We will have updates about that hopefully soon. Shown here on the car, let's go ahead and step over here. We have one of the tanks installed in the engine bay, and this one, you might notice it's a prototype. We didn't quite have the fancy logo etched into it just yet. And here's that swivel I was talking about, and this is the hose that comes from your radiator. Basically, this is the bleed off for if your radiator sees more than what your cap is rated for, what pressure it's rated for. It's going to bleed that coolant into your overflow. So when you have the system under pressure, it's up to temperature, and then it cools down, your coolant is then going to condense. It's going to cool down and condense at the same time. And when that happens, if you have any basically room essentially in your cooling system after your coolant cools down and starts contracting, it's going to need to pull coolant from your overflow to replace that volume of the coolant that is then contracting. So this hose actually is attributed to both feeding the overflow for when you overpressure it, or if you're getting up to pressure and it needs to bleed off some of that, and it also will return that coolant back to the radiator, assuming that you've got coolant in your tank. In a nutshell, that's our overflow tank. So let's move over to our washer bottle. Many of you are probably familiar with the cappuccino washer bottle kit, as that's something that has been on the market from several different manufacturers and vendors, as well as on our website. We used to sell them. We recently decided to make the switch to these guys because basically the cappuccinos had a few issues that we didn't necessarily think were ideal. It works great for being able to relocate the washer bottle for if you're doing a turbo install and you have an NB with ABS that has that washer bottle over the top of the exhaust manifold. You got to move it if you want to put a turbo in your car. So, you know, there was definitely some distinct benefits for running a cappuccino bottle to relocate your stock washer bottle, even if you just wanted to get it out of the engine bay to kind of clean up your engine bay. This tank in particular, you can see that it's the same kind of construction. It's all aluminum welded construction. Again, this is a tank we have made just for us. If you see the FM in the corner, that means it's from us. It's a real legitimate Flyin Miata product. This also, besides being quite a bit more sleek looking, in my opinion, is a larger capacity tank. This is nearly 2 liters worth of capacity. So it's a much larger tank than the cappuccino. You can kind of see here the cappuccino is almost about here. It also has the mounting points built onto it that are specific to the windshield wiper cowl on these cars. This is NA and NB Miata, all 1990 through 2005 Miatas. And you don't have to have additional brackets. You're not adapting a bottle that was meant to go in a different car into this car. This is designed specifically for Miatas. So it's very simple. Basically, there's one bolt, and it's in. Very easy. It also has the right bung here, so that way you can reuse your factory washer pump and grommet. So you don't have to go buy anything extra. There's no additional cost. You have to get a new washer pump with the kit. You just reuse what you have. The stock pumps are generally pretty long-lived, so that's not an issue. Because this is not a system that's normally under pressure, these do have a vented cap. See that little itty-bitty small hole in the middle of this one? That's the vent. Since these tanks, the washer fluid tanks, are not really under pressure, or they shouldn't be under much, if any, pressure, even with the pump going, but you still want to be able to let air in whenever you're utilizing the pump and moving that fluid, because it has to replace that fluid with air when it's being moved around. So it is vented, but it is very small, so the likelihood of this splashing out is very low, even if you're on the track and you're swinging through the turns with high G-forces. One of the reasons that I really like this is the cappuccino bottle, which I have in my own personal car, because I got it before this tank came out, is that the cappuccinos, more often than not, they don't sit in the wiper cowl quite even. They usually have a little bit of an angle to them, and usually it's towards the cap. So you kind of end up not being able to utilize some of the space that's on the far end, and it just, you know, it stays filled up with air rather than using the whole thing for wiper fluid. So this will sit in the wiper cowl, very nice and neat and flush. Let's go ahead and we'll move over to the car. That way we can see what it looks like in person as it's in situ in the vehicle. So you can see here, it also sits well, it's hard to see without that gasket in the way, but this is pretty much even, just maybe a hair below the level of this wiper cowl divider, your firewall divider. So you're not going to have issues with it hitting the hood. It's a little bit lower. Even the cap is a little bit lower than the cappuccino. You can also see over here on this side that we've got the pump, how it fits into the side there. Easy to access. You can see the connector and the wires, the plug there. Again, very easy to access. So if you need to do anything with it later after the fact, you can still access it with the tank in position. And then that mounting point, you can see there's one bolt on this side. So it utilizes an existing hole in most firewalls. If for some reason you have an odd car where the firewall doesn't have a hole, all you have to do is drill I think it's a 10 millimeter hole. No big deal. And then on this side, you utilize this bolt, if you can see it around my fat finger. And this holds up your vacuum line, the hard line that goes across the firewall. So you utilize the same point that, again, it's already an existing point on pretty much all left-hand drive cars. So you don't have to drill any hole there. So very easy. You don't have to worry about adapter brackets or anything like that. Very simple to just bolt it in place and go. This kit also does include, you can't really see it here, but I'll bring it over here back to the table. It also does include a new wiring harness. So there on the car, you could see that it had that connector for the pump. And if you're moving your washer bottle over from the far corner, if you've got it in the passenger side corner, or if this is an NA, like the M Edition models and the NAs that had the wiper bottle actually in the bumper cover up front, you need to be able to run a length of harness to be able to get it back to the wiper cowl. So we include that for you. Another thing that a lot of other kits don't include is a jumper harness like this. So this is a length of wire that is long enough for wherever your bottle is in the engine bay, depending on NAs or NBs, it doesn't matter. There are a couple extra little spade connectors in here, and then there's another little goodie bag here that has the little connectors that are the same as stock. You don't have to go buy connectors or anything like that. We do leave this basically unassembled or not terminated, I guess is probably the correct term. So that way you can decide what the length is, because again, you may need to have it a little longer or a little shorter depending on where your washer bottle originated. And this also includes the hardware to be able to bolt the tank into place, as well as some little pads to keep it protected, so that way when this tank sits down, it's not going to rub, it's not going to squeak, it's not going to rattle. This has pretty much everything you need. The only thing that it does not include, which you may or may not need, is replacement hose for going from your washer pump off to the side up to the hood. So if you need to replace your hose, we do have a hose maintenance kit. And then it also does not include the sprayers that go on top of the hood. So if you want, we do have those separately. The ones that we sell are actually the fan style. They're completely drop in, very easy. They do a fan spray, really good upgrade. I recommend them. You know, say that you don't have a modified car, or if you just have a stock car, is this something that you should be considering? In my opinion, I think yes. If you are interested in making your engine bay clean, tidy, if you like adding stuff that is kind of a bling factor, these definitely tick those boxes. But as far as even stock Miatas, do you need this or would this be beneficial for you? I really like the way that it tidies up the engine bay. From a purely aesthetic point, I think that having the washer bottle is a good idea because it gets it out of the engine bay. Functionally, this makes a lot of sense for Miatas if you want to be able to replace your stock tanks, which by this point, you know, even if you have a 2005 Miata, that's 16 years old at this point. So, you know, that plastic is getting up there and it's probably starting to yellow if it isn't really yellow by now. I've seen several that the tanks have gotten just nasty. They've cracked. They don't even hold fluid anymore. So if you're at that point and you need to replace it anyway, it's a good time to upgrade, and you might as well get something that you like looking at. Thank you all for watching this and for paying attention. I certainly appreciate it. And as always, if you want to talk about these products or anything else, get in touch. We'd love to talk with you about your Miata and see what is the best upgrade path for you. As always, thanks again for joining us at FM Live, and we will talk to you this time next week. And until then, stay in spool.